Welcome, everyone. The webinar will begin shortly and will be recorded. Connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. Please use hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Once again, we would love to connect with you. So on Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. This webinar will begin shortly and it will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Okay, once again, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Sierra Sanchez and I will be behind the scenes helping to produce this webinar. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we would love for you to introduce yourself, so please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city or state, and your organization. Be sure to select both panelists and attendees when responding so that we all know who is here. All attendees are in listen-only mode, but we encourage your engagement by posting questions in the Q&A box. We will dedicate the last portion of the webinar to respond to questions you post during the discussion. This webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording will be emailed to all who registered. And lastly, we will be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during Q&A and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Lastly, before we start, I would just like to call your attention to our upcoming GLR Learning Tuesdays webinars, including sessions in our regular 3 p.m. Eastern time slot and frequent sessions in the earlier 12:30 time slot as well. We will wrap up March with 2 sessions, one a new peer exchange engaging state and community coalitions in conversation around the strategy of learning pods, and an afternoon session in partnership with Overdeck Family Foundation, where we will learn from community and district leaders on how they are shattering the walls between home and school, making family engagement more authentic and powerful than ever. In early April, we continue our learning loss recovery series with a session on student assessments, where we will discuss and learn about the use of K-3 diagnostics to inform differentiated instruction for students. We'll be sure to add a link in the chat box for more information and registration for these upcoming learning opportunities. Joining you now is Yoli Flores, Chief Learning Officer for the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Thank you, Sierra. Thank you for setting us up. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar entitled EdTech and Accelerated Learning, The Future is Now. As you all have been tracking our work around learning loss recovery, we know that learning loss recovery efforts begin in earnest across this nation. And as that happens, we turn our attention to helping children and students make up for lost instructional learning time. And as we do that, an essential question to ask is, how can research and evidence-based technology tools help us accelerate learning at scale for students? As noted by the Office of Educational Technology at the US Department of Education, technology is a powerful tool for transforming learning. But to realize fully the benefits of technology, the office reminds us, educators need to use technology effectively in their practice. It calls on education stakeholders, including leaders, teachers, faculty and other educators, researchers, policymakers, funders, technology developers, community members and organizations, and of course, learners and their families, for all of us to find ways to take full advantage of technology to support learning. Our panel today will help dive into this call to action, helping us answer the question of how we ensure that EdTech, in fact, helps us accelerate learning, especially for those students whose learning was most impacted by COVID school closures. So that's the topic in the conversation for today. And without further delay, let me introduce to you a very special guest, Valerie Truesdale, who will offer opening and closing remarks. And then I will introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Sean Joseph. So first, Valerie Truesdale serves as Assistant Director for AASA, the Superintendent's Association, helping to scale professional learning and networking for school system leaders. Formerly, she served as a Chief Technology and Transformation Officer, Superintendent in 2 districts. She was also Chief Academic Officer, Assistant State Superintendent, leading policy, licensure, and student assessment, a high school principal, and most importantly, a teacher. And I'll briefly introduce Dr. Joseph, who will serve as our moderator. Dr. Sean Joseph is currently an assistant professor and co-director of the Urban Superintendent Academy at Howard University. He is an advocate of educational equity and works to understand how school boards and superintendents lead for equity. So with that, let me invite Valerie Truesdale to offer her opening remarks, and she'll get us started. Valerie.
Thank you, Yoli. Welcome, everybody. It is my great honor to be here with you today, participating in this professional learning opportunity. I want to commend the Campaign for Grade Level Reading for providing Learning Tuesdays. This session today is a wonderful gathering of higher education representatives from Howard University, corporate partners represented by Verizon, nonprofits represented by Digital Promise, and community of family partners. We are all here to examine the importance of emerging from this global pandemic with an even greater urgency for equity-focused education for all children. Marginalized children, particularly those in poverty, Black, Brown, Indigenous children, special needs students, and LGBTQ students, all of our students are in need of our collective commitment to ensuring that we learn from this year and we emerge from the global pandemic stronger, better, and more focused on increasing the urgency of serving all children. This session is about how we can leverage technology to advance learning loss recovery, ensuring digital equity for all children. Technology allows us to accelerate our work, serves as a force multiplier when coupled with high quality teaching. Nothing can ever replace high quality teaching and our children's first teachers, their families, but technology can help increase the energy with which students learn during the day and extend their learning beyond the day. It is my great pleasure today to invite one of the most courageous leaders in our country, Dr. Sean Joseph, to lead our discussion. Sean was the founding host superintendent of the Social Emotional Learning cohort for AASA, the Superintendent's Association. I admired Dr. Joseph's bold equity work when he was in Nashville, and am so pleased that I am proud to work with him in the Urban Superintendent Certification Program in collaboration with Howard University, because Dr. Joseph is our lead in that program. I would like to invite all of you here on the webinar today to not sit back and learn, but to lean in and learn, to engage in the chat, to really roll up your sleeves and think about how can we begin to realize the mitigation of the learning loss and using technology to advance that work. Dr. Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Truesdale. And first, I want to thank you for all of your years of excellence in serving in school districts and now helping leaders stay connected and stay focused in this time. That your work has been exemplary, and America thanks you, and our children thank you, because when you build a leader, you can help build a community, and you've done that through your work with AASA. I also want to take an opportunity to thank the Campaign for Third Grade Level Reading for facilitating, such a timely discussion at this time. As a Black man in America, I choose to be an optimist. I've learned that I must have the mindset to believe that things are just going to get better in every aspect of our lives, including education. As such, I don't believe that this is a moment of doom and gloom for American public education, because I'm optimistic that we have extraordinary communities in America filled with students, filled with teachers, filled with school leaders, filled with school system leaders, school board members, mayors, and governors who will not let this moment of challenge define our potential. Having said that, without a doubt, the long-term impact of the pandemic is going to be significant. Our greatest hope is that school system leaders and communities come together with aggressive plans to mitigate and address the damage that has been done. Now, this pandemic exposed many of the weaknesses that, quite frankly, we knew existed in our school systems, whether we work in urban systems, suburban systems, or rural systems. Issues such as crumbling and overcrowded school facilities, a lack of technology in our schools, the lack of broadband in our communities, poor reading instruction and the lack of literacy-rich community environments, poor conceptual understandings of mathematical concepts and science instruction, issues of hunger, homelessness, and the need for high-quality teachers and high-quality leaders in every single school and in every single school system in this country were some of the issues that we were trying to address before the pandemic. And now those issues have just been much more intensified. But I am thankful that we have a president and we have a Congress that has recognized the need to make important investments in the K-12 arena. It was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. who once said in one of his final interviews that in America, there must be a revolution of values. Racism, economic exploitation, and poverty are inextricably tied together, and we will not get rid of one unless we get rid of the other. I frame our discussion today by Dr. King's words because I believe that the effective use of technology can truly disrupt how we've done education in America, liberating the minds of historically marginalized communities in a way that both challenges the systems, practices, and structures that have made the disease of racism hard to cure in this country. Technology can also accelerate learning, which will increase economic prosperity. So it is within this context and in a spirit of hope that I'd like to introduce our panelists for this evening, who are going to challenge us to be optimistic, and they're going to challenge us to think about how we can use technology to aggressively and strategically accelerate learning in all of our schools. So first, I'd like to introduce Maria Alvarez. Maria is the Vice President of Family and Community Engagement at Common Sense. She oversees content creation and distribution strategy for family-facing resources about media and technology. Her work has been deeply focused on early childhood education, lower income and Latinx families. Next, we have Amanda Latasha Armstrong. Amanda Latasha Armstrong is a doctoral student at New Mexico State University, and her research interests include the intersection of early childhood, learning design, and technology, culture and diversity, and multicultural education. She's also a research fellow with the New America's Education Policy Program, and also works at NMSU's Learning Game Lab, where she leads user testing and teaches children, she teaches summer sessions, with children and youth on topics related to design. Next, I'd like to introduce Lydia Logan. Lydia Logan is the Executive Director of the Verizon Innovative Learning Schools Initiative at Digital Promise. The Verizon Innovative Learning Schools provides technology, internet access, teacher professional development, and IT support to a national network of 412 Title I public middle and high schools. Lydia has spent the last 25 years working in policy, philanthropy, and nonprofit management with a focus on education and workforce development. Finally, we have Mark Williams. Mark serves as the Chief of Partner Success for Bell Excel, a nonprofit focused on supporting partners to lead quality expanded learning programs by leveraging technology and evidence-based practices. Mark has dedicated his entire career to the issue of educational equity and innovation, as both as a teacher and as a nonprofit leader. So welcome everyone to this wonderful, wonderful and engaging discussion. So I'm going to kick us off with just a set of rapid fire questions where I'd like you all to take 1 minute to very quickly reflect on and give us one big insight or one essential question about the promise of technology to transform learning. So anyone can jump in at this time.
I'll start. Hello, everyone. Very nice to be here. Thank you for joining the webinar. My 1 minute quick response to that question, Sean, would be something that I've been really seeing over the last few years, and it's how technology has the potential to support learning, right? To help kids and adults explore their areas of interest, to support academic goals they have. But it doesn't happen magically. We have to be intentional. Educators, schools, families, students, communities. We all of us have to be intentional and really learn the detailed skills and the detailed citizenship knowledge that we need to really leverage the power of media technology to achieve the goals that we have in school and in life.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more, Maria. And, you know, this has obviously been a challenging year for everyone, and it's increased the need, it's put the need for technology at the forefront. Education wouldn't be possible in many places without leveraging technology. And I think one of the things that was highlighted over the past year is the amazing amount of educational technology programs and systems that have been developed, including from folks on this panel, things that can be leveraged. And I think it's really important for us just to continually think about how we can effectively curate those resources and make it increasingly easier for teachers and scholars and families to access the great content that's available and support our systems in making it easier to plan and execute great programming. You know, the other thing that's just been on my mind a lot is just the social emotional well-being of scholars. And they've been so connected to technology for so long. I'm also thinking about that transition back to in-person learning for so many and the support that it's going to take to move scholars back into that in-person space.
Thank you, Mark.
So I would say one of the big lessons that we have learned is that technology is like a magnifying glass. It will amplify good things that are happening, solid plans that you have to support educators, strong pedagogical frameworks, right? If there is good teaching happening already, right, then adding technology can result in some amazing things and great experiences for children. If those foundational pieces are not there and you add technology, it will amplify what's missing.
Absolutely.
And so I would say, think about the use of technology very carefully before implementing it. And to Maria's point, be very intentional about what students know in advance, what kind of professional development teachers have received, because you want that magnifying glass to show great things.
Thank you. Now let's dig a little deeper, and I'm going to invite Lydia and Maria to share a response to the next question that I have. And that question is, you know, each one of you are leading efforts to ensure that EdTech reaches its potential to accelerate learning, both at school and at home. What have you learned about the most essential elements of success for teachers and administrators, but also for our families? In other words, what do we need to get right to make sure students benefit, and most especially today, that we accelerate learning to make up for lost time?
So at Digital Promise, we work at the intersection of networks of educators, researchers, and innovators. We work to close the digital learning gap through gaps in access, gaps in participation, and gaps in powerful use. So if you come to our website and you look around, you will see how we are active in each of those areas with the networks. that we have. Next slide, please. So we are focused very much on powerful learning, and you'll hear a lot about powerful learning with technology and those elements as we talk today. I think that's really the purpose of this whole conversation. I'm going to zip through these slides that the viewers can take a look at later. But we have a lot of resources in research. We have an internal research team, our learning sciences team, and our powerful learning work that we're doing directly with students. We have 2 networks that are shown on the next slide. We do a lot of work with AASA and other leaders and directly with schools. The network that I run is our network of Title I schools. That's the Verizon Innovative Learning Schools program. And over several years, you can jump 2 slides now, the program has evolved to tablets, professional development, internet access, home use, 4G and 5G, and innovative labs. So let's get to the sort of the meat of the success piece, which I think I've got on the next slide. And we found that there are 6 critical elements in one-to-one being implemented successfully in schools. It's having a strong leader with a clear vision that's communicated. It's an accessible and shared transformation plan grounded in data, ongoing professional learning support for teachers, which we've all talked about. I'm sure you'll hear much more about today. Reliable technology with internet access for all teachers and students. And that's every day, all the time, not, gaps in access for weeks and weeks. That's really a key piece of the equity work that we're talking about. Ongoing support for students and caregivers. So to get right to this question that Dr. Joseph posed, and equity as a mindset. Parents need to understand that using technology in school has the ability to support their students and their learning. And there are responsibilities that go with that at home. Maria will talk about digital citizenship. We often hear from parents, they are not sure of their role in supporting their students' learning. So making sure that schools are helping parents to understand what they can do at home. Those may be, we've got some principals who push out digital newsletters that are done with audio. They may be translated into different languages. We have one school where the instructional technology coach is hosting Zoom cooking classes to engage parents and getting them used to the platform and learning styles that their students are using. It's understanding that the device is a learning device. It's not a toy, which is something that parents also have to get used to, because technology is not always the experience that we've had as adults without technology when we were school age is very different now. So helping parents to understand discipline and how you don't take away the device unless they're damaging it. You look at other kinds of restrictions and how they need to take care of the device. So charging it at night, making sure it's ready for learning the next day. Having areas where students are doing homework where to the extent possible, it's quiet and they are available to use that device with some supervision. Understanding what may be happening with data. So when we have a lot of schools with families that may be mixed status of documented and undocumented status, and they may have concerns about where is the data going? Where is my child's information ending up? Is it with the school? Is it with the internet access provider? Is it with someone else? Making sure that you ask parents what their concerns are. And it isn't a one-way conversation from the school or the district to the parents, but it's a conversation. And that there are supports and ongoing supports for the caregivers so that they can be comfortable with what it means for their child, the scholar in their family, to be using technology to the best benefit possible. Maria, do you want to talk a little bit about Common Sense Media, which, by the way, is something we recommend highly, and almost all of our schools are using it. So we are huge fans.
Thank you. Let me just continue speaking more about families. Linda, as you said, that's my role at Common Sense Media, and I'm going to I'd like to share the next slide. Sierra, you help me, please?
Oh, these are some of our results that folks can review later on.
Yes. Okay, there, that one. Thank you. I like to just to start sharing some highlights of what I've seen and my team I've been seeing over the last 12 months. And I have to start just making this really honest statement in terms of the families that we are wanting to connect with, especially during these very challenging times. And those are lower income families, and we are really paying attention to their needs. We have spent some time doing qualitative research and quantitative research as well in the last 12 months. And when it comes to EdTech tools, one of the most recurrent challenges that I've seen, and this is not only during the pandemic, it happened before. Families that are not really used to have access to tech tools platforms, and they have jobs that don't require the regular use of a laptop or any other type of electronic device. For those families, it's a really intimidating experience just to have a new device at home. They were forced, because of the pandemic, to becoming some sort of teachers at home. And in many homes, parents were not even there. They had to go out because, especially in the Brown and Black community, these are frontline workers that needed to be out even in the middle of the pandemic to make sure that their kids had something to eat. So it's been, I think, a very difficult experience for families, but I am also, as Sean is, an optimistic person. And I think that in the middle of the challenges, there are always opportunities. And what I've seen is that these families that are really, really resilient are doing their best. But what I would love for all of us to think and reflect on here in this group is to think really trying to be very empathetic in terms of where these families are when we speak to them, when we are sharing resources with them. There are families that are even scared to have an iPad or to have any type of tablet at home. So we need to really, I think, start from that place of empathy and trying to understand what their needs are. And I've been also speaking with family engagement teams across the country and early childhood. I've been doing a lot of work in the early childhood space. There are concerns in terms of what do we do with this insane amount of screen time that kids are having during the pandemic. And there are parents that are worried about it and caregivers that are really concerned. And what we are saying is that really we need to do our best to find a balance if possible. But we know that families, especially the low income families that we are really trying to help out, that shouldn't be one top priority, and it's not, because there are other priorities at this point that are really urgent to solve and respond to. So with that being said, those are my initial statements. I would love to share a short video that we produced recently, and it's an example of tools that I believe might be helpful for all of you to be aware of. Sierra, if you can play the video, please.
Here are 6 tips to help parents and kids get started using the Seesaw Class app. The first thing to do is download the free app. You'll find it on the Google Play Store if you're using an Android device, or on the App Store if you're on an iPhone or iPad. The next step is signing into the Seesaw Class account. To do that, you'll need the home learning code that was shared by your child's teacher via email or as a printed handout. Once you have the code ready, open the app on your device, choose I'm a Student, then scan the code using Seesaw's built-in QR code scanner. You may need to give the app permission to use your device's camera first. If your camera is not an option, just use the keypad to type in the code letters and access your Seesaw account. Once you're in the class, you'll find 3 main sections to explore: the journal, activities, and your inbox. The journal is where students see the work they've posted for teacher approval. Tap the green Add button to see all the ways to add to the journal. Students can take a photo and mark it up, draw a picture, record a video, upload a file, write a note, or copy and paste a link to share. In Activities, you'll see the assignments and lessons the teacher has posted for the students to complete. And lastly, there's the inbox, where you'll find all the latest messages and notifications from your child's teacher or school. For more tips to fit your family, become a member at commonsensemedia.org.
This video is one example of the many tools that you will find at Common Sense Media. And as Lydia said, we are working with parents and families and also with educators. And I'm also going to share a few more resources that I would love for you to explore as we navigate the rest of the pandemic times. One that I want to highlight, because I know we have many colleagues here that are working in the early childhood space, is this texting program that is a free bilingual texting program for families with kids 3 to 8. And it's called Tech Balance. It's pretty easy to sign up. Families that prefer to receive the text messages in English, just text the word kids to the number 21555. And for the ones that are Spanish speaking, they just need to type text familia to the same number. And what they are going to be seeing is receiving a couple of text messages per week with media recommendations, educational tools that we have revised. We also have distance learning tools and a lot of information that are, all of the tips are research-based and are really looking for this meaningful home connection that I was referring to at the beginning of this presentation. We really want to be intentional, and this is a platform that I think will really help many, many families. Sierra, if you go to the next one, please. These are all the resources. Again, the texting program, we have a bilingual, a list of, that is growing. It's a growing list of bilingual digital literacy videos. The one that I just showed is one of them, but we have videos for these families and parents, caregivers that are not really tech-savvy people, the ones that really need a lot of hand-holding. So we have videos about Zoom, about Google Classroom, and many other tools. Joel is going to be sharing all these resources in the chat if you are interested in exploring later. So let's move to the next one, Sierra, please. And this is also why Open School is one resource that Common Sense Media launched back in March last year, right after the pandemic began. And it's a great tool for educators and families with free educational tools from K to 12. And it's an amazing resource for families and educators. Let's go to the next one. So I wanted to share some thoughts in terms of how I see we can leverage what we have gone through in the last 12 months. And as we move forward, hopefully soon out of the pandemic, I think there are many lessons that we need to keep in mind. And many have to do with, again, starting from an empathy place, really talking to families in ways that we are recognizing their strengths, their culture, and also speak to them in a way that is friendly, that is really looking to create meaningful connections with the families. And when it comes to tech tools, I always say we need to be really, really thoughtful and intentional in choosing quality and focusing more in the quality of the tech tools that we give to our kids. So that time that they spend with devices really help them learn, really help them develop in areas that they are interested in those areas. Talking back to the learning loss point that we are covering here today, how do we use those tech tools to support the areas where they need help? So those are my key remarks, Sean, and I'm gonna just turn back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lydia and Maria, for sharing such rich information. I think we do have to do much more to be much more intentional in communicating in families' language. That's the first way you say, you're welcome and I see you and I'm working with you. We have enough technology tools to not make language a barrier anymore, but they have to know the resources, and you shared some great ones. So thank you so much. But now I want to jump a little bit into the out of school space. So I'm going to invite Mark to come back onto the screen. And Mark, thank you for being here. One of the questions that I have for you is that you've been leveraging ed tech primarily in the out of school space. How is technology helping to advance learning? And how is supporting education partners such as youth development programs, after-school programs, and high-dosage tutoring programs, which is on everybody's mind as a high-impact strategy for learning loss recovery? How do we ensure that ed tech works effectively in and out of school spaces?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Yeah, many of the things that Lydia and Maria are talking about in terms of increasing access to technology physically, and Maria ensuring that we have great resources and accessible tools for families, those are key parts of any program for sure. I mean, what we see consistently is that scholars often demonstrate loss over the summer academically. Last year, that loss was exacerbated by the realities of influenced by COVID and scholars working from home in the spring and last summer. And we're expecting to see that continue as we look at data going into this summer, which has made this a major priority for school districts and community-based youth development organizations across the country. So at Bell Excel, we know that community partners are the key folks in making out of school time work happen and come to life for communities and for young people. And what we aspire to do is bring our experience and research and evidence base to the table to support partners in running the highest quality, greatest impact programs possible. And so, you know, as we're thinking about technology, in educational technology specifically, there's often a lot of focus on materials to scholars, to families, to educators, to support learning from that perspective. And those are all hugely important and having a profound impact on supporting scholar growth. We're thinking from a different perspective and thinking about the complexity that comes with running an out of school time program and how we can facilitate that. So Sierra, if you could go to the next slide. One of the things that we see from just research in out of school time space, and there's an example on the screen here, a study by the Wallace Foundation in conjunction with RAND, Getting to Work on Summer Learning. That study showed that there are 8 key elements that go into running a successful program that has impact. And those pieces range from choosing a high quality academic curriculum and high quality enrichment activities to administrative pieces of planning and managing a budget, to creating a positive culture and climate. All of these elements that we know are critical to drive success. And yet to achieve those can be a heavy lift for school districts and community-based partners. And so if we can go to the next slide, our focus has been on leveraging technology just to bring all of those different pieces together. So this year we're launching a platform that is designed to support program planning from beginning to end, allowing administrators and teachers to collaborate in the same space and think about all of the myriad of tasks that are involved in setting up a program, thinking about quality from all angles, ensuring that folks understand what quality indicators look like, that they're able to access real-time data, that they can access curriculum resources in the same place and also engage in their professional learning in the same place. And at the core of this is a design for equity, similar to what Lydia and Maria were both focusing on, just ensuring that all of our scholars and families and communities have the same level of access. And it's our belief that being able to bring these pieces together, curating some of those content-oriented pieces, coupling them with really powerful administrative tools, can really be a help in lightening that lift for community partners overall. The other piece that we're thinking about a lot is professional learning. And we have seen that this summer in particular provides a really unique opportunity and a powerful opportunity for educators to engage in professional learning. So in the next slide, we note a study from RAND that was recently released that shows that teachers expressed having their summer professional development having a particularly powerful impact, especially when they're teaching in an academic focused program. And that is based on having a little bit of a learning lab, maybe some lightened pressures. It gives them a chance to try new things. And one of the important factors there is that it continues through the course of the year. So those teachers are expressing that they're taking those skills from the summer and bringing them through the school year. And so as we think about technology, we want to make access to those professional learning opportunities easier and more flexible, less expensive to manage. So looking at more self-guided on-demand learning, including videos or live webinars that educators can join onto on their schedule, as opposed to having to schedule an in-person PD only. Really thinking about the diversity of learning styles and making sure folks can access content in different ways, ensuring that folks can come back to content over time. And, in doing that, providing some of that self-guided learning can really create opportunities for the in-person time to go even further and have deeper conversations. So, a lot of what we're obsessed with right now is, again, lightening that lift that comes with running some of these out of school time programs, leveraging technology to make that happen, make it easier for folks to focus on quality of implementation and really move to the next level. So they're focusing less on some of those administrative hurdles and more on what is in the best interest of scholars and communities that they're serving specifically.
Mark, you made a number of great points, but what resonated with me was the fact that technology should allow school systems and communities to scale excellence at a much more much more cost-efficient manner. And so I think there's a real opportunity to bring high quality professional development and high quality supports to schools for those people that invest in the training and the execution, because that can be tricky. But if they get it right, they should be able to do it cheaper in a much more strategic, targeted way.
Absolutely. And we're obsessed with that on a daily basis, Sean.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, now let's move on to Amanda, and let's talk about some of the earlier learning and ed tech in the early spaces. And my question to you, Amanda, is, we're so delighted that you could join us to offer this perspective in the early learning space. Ed tech targeting our youngest children, our toddlers and our preschoolers, has been on the rise in recent years. What guidance, or more specifically, what cautions would you offer to early learning professionals, to caregivers, and to parents about ed tech tools as they think about using them in the early learning space?
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that question, Dr. Joseph. I think, going back to the larger question that you were asking earlier, when we're talking about technology and tech and specifically with early childhood, that when we're moving forward, we want to keep in mind the complexity of it, that it's the whole child we're thinking about. We're thinking about supporting communities and families. We're thinking about what the technology is and the media and what's on those devices, and that those aren't isolated experiences. And so as we're moving forward, thinking about how could we kind of reframe that to thinking about how to create learning experiences that are meaningful and inclusive. And I'll point to some things that I've gathered from my years of being in this specific field in early childhood and tech, and really summarizing some points from research. And then in the chat box, you'll notice that there'll be some resources and research shared to kind of point to some additional information that if you want to find out as well. So I'll go to the first points going back to what a lot of people have been talking about today, which is really being intentional about the technology, intentional about the resources that are curated and the types of tools. So the ways that could happen is learning the capabilities of the tools themselves, like as educators, as people in policy, playing with the technology tools so that we're familiar with themselves, including families as well, and being able to mess up and being able to kind of figure things out, and then also giving children the license to be able to explore the technology tools and explore them. We want to also think about cultivating a professional learning network similar to what other people are talking about. In the chat box, you'll notice some different organizations and resources being shared. And some of those are organizations and groups that focus on early childhood and technology that offer different ideas for tools. There's ISTE's PLN Early Learning Network has an active Twitter group that posts and it has Twitter chats about different types of technologies. So really finding out ways in which we as adults, as those who work with young children, can really create meaningful professional learning opportunities. And then even when we're looking at technology and media, being mindful of creating a balance of tools that are both culturally responsive. So thinking about what the culture, the background of the children are that we're working with, as well as exposing them to other cultures and other identity groups, but in a meaningful context. And then, so the next point is we want to also think about how technology is connected to other experiences. And that, especially when we're thinking about young children, what does that balance look like, which can be kind of tricky given our current situation. And so also allowing some grace right now because of the circumstances themselves. So allowing that sort of grace to happen. So one of the things is thinking about the diversity of technology tools. So sometimes it comes from looking at what families already have and then seeing how we can leverage the technology that they have, whether it's like text messaging, or maybe it's apps, or maybe it's the camera, like some sort of feature on the technology tool to leverage with the family, and seeing if we can also engage them, the children, in other sorts of technology experience. And that could be from, gathering different devices, from, purchasing different items to have, and then using your PLN to kind of figuring out what items would work best for your setting. We also want to think about blending the technology experiences with non-tech experiences, and I'm including low tech from something like digital cameras to thinking about, iPads and robots and all those sorts of things. So thinking about technology as well as like the non-tech, more the tangible sorts of experiences that they can have with maybe like drawing something, or being able to write something, and being able to kind of melt those two areas together, or even if they're building something. And so thinking about how we can use these sorts of experiences together to create kind of a meaningful learning experience. And one thing, the way that could happen is creating specific projects on specific topics. So if you want to explore maybe something about nature, or maybe explore, or you could also maybe want to explore programming, which is illustrated in the Bebot that's there. But just thinking about what are some projects that maybe you could have that focus on a specific topic, and blending technology with non-tech tools to be able to explore that a little more. And then the third point I want to emphasize on the next slide is thinking about like the strength-based, asset-based approach, which so many people illustrated today. And when talking about the strength-based, it's really not only thinking about the child, but also thinking about the systems and the people around them, and thinking and leveraging those sorts of strengths and assets. And so, yes, there's research that are pointed to within the chat that refer to ways in which technology supports learning when it's intentional. But there's also ways that technology can be used to support some social emotional, and that could be through like connecting with another peer. It could be helping them understand themselves and their different emotions that they have by taking pictures and sharing those with their peers. Also developing their creativity with understanding what different types of technologies do and what you can do with them. I think part of moving forward, we have to think about helping children also be curious about technology, be curious about their environments, and then being curious enough to explore the technology tool without having the right answer. That's something that I've noticed in my work over the years, is giving children and youth, and even ourselves, license to just kind of share and explore. and also looking at families and communities themselves that the children come from, making sure we're thinking about what they already have, what they have to offer, and working in collaboration with them. And then also thinking about society and the social structures themselves and how children are a part of that, and maybe those other sorts of experiences are impacting them, and how we can mindfully use technology to help support their holistic growth and development. And so, yeah, so then the next slide, I just have my general contact information. I also do post for Edutopia and as well as Britannica for Families, where I talk about some of these concepts and pulling in the research to practice to give people ideas about what they can do in their settings.
Thank you so much. I mean, your presentation brings us to, I think, probably a very important conversation that I'd like to invite everybody back on, and that's us talking about bridging the academic gap, the academics and social emotional learning. Because what we know, right, is we shouldn't go back to education the way we used to. I think there's a great opportunity here now in this moment to really address, again, some of the chronic needs. And one of the chronic needs I didn't mention earlier, but is profound. As we know, we have more and more students dealing with issues of anxiety and depression and all sorts of emotional needs and this isolation that they've been in over the year, and going back into schools, but schools not like school right now, I'm sure has tremendous impact. So my question is that, the pandemic has had an enormous impact on the social emotional well-being of everyone, not just students, but our teachers, our building services workers, our secretarial staff. I mean, everybody in the world has been forever changed as a result of this past year we've been in. So, I'm wondering if you all could share your thoughts on how technology, including ed tech, can support professionals, students, and families. In other words, is there a technology bridge between academics and social emotional learning?
I think there absolutely is a bridge, and I think we need to be aware that it is our educators, probably more than almost anyone in the education setting, who have really, faced challenge, because they're going through the working from home the rest of us are, with possibly their families, but also all the children that they are trying to teach and feel responsible for while learning in a new setting, right? There's a lot of anxiety, new situations, different kinds of preparation that they've needed to do and training they've needed to receive, all sort of building it while flying it. So as we think about social emotional care, not just for the students, but also for our educators and what they're going through. Our schools have taken on different strategies. Some of those are co-planning for educators, so that if, for instance, all the 5th grade math teachers plan together, deliver the same lesson, so that if someone gets sick or someone has something come up in their family, they can back each other up, they can help to co-design. It's given them a sense of community. It's also given them sort of a way to have a backup plan in case anything goes wrong. So some of that kind of strategy happened before the pandemic. We've seen that as one way for teachers to support each other and to feel like they've got the pressure relieved a little bit. Some of our schools are using journaling for high school students, or older middle school students, so that they have a place to express themselves. For younger students, they're doing sort of morning check-ins, I feel, and they may have icons of smiley faces or sad faces as a check-in, so that teachers have an idea of how students are feeling. I think, in the past, teachers are often the caring adult in the lives of students when they may or may not have someone outside of school. Again, that's an added pressure for educators, but for students to now be asked to be online and to have their home lives exposed when that may not be something they're comfortable doing, requires all of us to think about, and I can't remember who brought up the empathy. I think that was you, Maria, and putting ourselves in the shoes of children and what that means for them to have an online learning situation, possibly with, you know, background siblings. It also means thinking differently about homework assignments and whether we're requiring cameras on or other kinds of check-ins so that students are not obligated to do something that may heighten their levels of anxiety. So co-planning for teachers, check-ins for teachers, check-ins for students, thinking about the online, synchronous, asynchronous kinds of assignments and environments, and making sure that students feel like they are supported in an age-appropriate way, depending on what it is that they're working with. I think those are a handful of things that we've seen happening in our schools.
Lydia, you've given some great advice thinking about the children. And I'd love for somebody to jump in to talk a little bit about the adults, because, you know, I'm worried that as we're talking about, like, even going into summer school this year, like, I don't know, I was a teacher for a number of years, and I don't know if anybody could pay me enough, as much as I cared about the kids and loved the kids, but just being so exhausted at this moment and needing that moment to recruit. I mean, what do we do to support our staffs and be intentional about them? Because we know that we pass our stress on to our children if we're not careful. And the administrator that forgets that is not going to get the outcomes that he wants from his teacher or his or her children. So what do we do? Any advice on what we can do for the adults?
Absolutely, I can jump in here, and I saw Maria, you came off of mute as well, but, you know, I've had a number of conversations recently with superintendents and other district leaders who are thinking about summer and what it looks like. And, you know, in a typical year, there's a lot about the academic loss and what academic curriculum are we going to utilize to drive things forward. And this year, this is sort of flipped around. What I hear more than anything is I'm worried about my children. I want to see my children. I want to make sure that they're safe and okay. And I want to make sure that we're creating space not only for the kids, but for the teachers to re-enter an in-person school setting in a safe way, in a supportive way specifically. And so it's definitely something that I'm hearing is on people's minds specifically. And, you know, a couple of things we're thinking about, you know, not just from an adult perspective of teachers, Sean, but families as well. Yeah. So, you know, thinking about that bridge between school and family. And, you know, Lydia, you were talking about some social emotional learning routines. How can we teach routines that teachers can utilize to check in with scholars and help them to develop some of those social emotional learning competencies and have them be transferable to home so that families can do those pieces as well, and try to create that consistency and, you know, and doing that support everyone. We're also really focused on providing folks with accessible resources and curricular materials that they can pick up and utilize easily. So that's something that we just think is hugely important for teachers to actually have a clear curriculum that says, here are routines that you can utilize every day, that you can build into just the day-to-day flow of your classroom. And here are some explicit lessons that can be leveraged to support or acknowledge or develop social emotional skills for your young people, which is something that I think in some cases have been developed, and we're trying to put them forward in a package that can work for summer specifically, both in an on-site setting and also in a remote setting, because I think we know that we're going to continue to see some of that shifting back and forth. And the last thing we're doing is we just, you know, launched a new online course that is focused on teachers being able to reflect on their own social emotional learning development, access more of the research that's driving that, spend time reflecting on their own social emotional learning well-being so that they can then put themselves in a place to, be better positioned to support their young people as well. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity here going into the summer.
Absolutely. And I'm going to invite Dr. Truesdale back into the conversation to have an opportunity to try to summarize. She probably has the hardest job in America at this moment to try to summarize all the great learning that was just communicated here. And then maybe pose a question before we go to participant questions.
Thank you, Sean. I just have been amazed to hear the different points of view, but are all focused in the same direction. It felt like people are coming at different on-ramps to a highway, but we're all going to the same place, and we're going to wind up with this commitment and energy towards it, with the idea that technology is going to help us advance, recouping so much of what we have lost, and particularly the emphasis I loved on this summer is just feels like it's going to be, maybe it's because the sun's out today, that we've got this energy all of a sudden, and that so many folks are getting both of their shots, that we're going to have a summer where kids can catch up and grow and move forward. So I'm really excited about everything I heard. Thank you all for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can find the Sean, would you want to do the questions?
Let's see what we have here. And I believe
Yeah.
we're going to bring Yoli back in, but let's see here. We have Alan Gutman said, just as children of parents and guardians with higher levels of education have advantages related to learning outcomes, are there comparable advantages for children of parents, guardians with higher levels of tech savvy? What programs and initiatives are in place to eliminate those disparities?
Anybody can jump in.
I think this is a tough question, because in some ways, right, this is another gap, right? And parents who either are more tech savvy or who will seek out tech savvy solutions. So they may know to go to Common Sense Media to find great, easily accessible, what we call bite-sized professional development, or bite-sized learning opportunities to try something new. Parents may not know where to go. And I think part of the great opportunity for a forum like this is to get the word out about what resources there are and what strategies we can share to help close some of those gaps. I certainly see it just among my friends, having the job that I have and sitting where I sit and working with phenomenal educators all the time who are constantly looking at the latest tools and the most innovative ways. And that mix of using technology and not using technology for rich learning experiences, I have the benefit of hearing about things I never would have known, and I share those with my friends, but I think we will see more gaps. I mean, I think the other thing that we talk about is post-pandemic, as though we were all in an equitable place and we're only mitigating the learning loss that is related to the pandemic. But even if we return to pre-pandemic learning levels, we had lots of gaps then. We are going to have new and different gaps, compounding some of the challenges we had before. I think it does present an opportunity, right? Dr. Joseph started out saying he's optimistic. I am optimistic that we will think differently about the time that we spend teaching and learning, what that looks like, how students are able to have more voice and choice, more competency-based learning. I think it will open up some thornier issues like attendance policies and degrees and things like that. But I think these are conversations that are worth having and thinking about what are the new gaps and how can we get the word out about ways to close them or mitigate them so that those inequities don't become new, long-lasting, challenges that set folks farther behind than where they were before.
Lydia, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And also, I know, right, no district has ever remediated itself into success, right? But we have these gaps that are going to exist right now. And so districts are going to have the challenge to figure out, how do we keep kids on grade level, but because they're falling behind, how do we put some type of remediation in and accelerate? And that's why I'm excited about the possibility of, a lot of people are talking about high dosage tutoring, right now, and can it be scaled with technology? And because look, let's face it, middle class families, upper middle class families, when things came, we were able to spend $400, $500 a month to get our kids tutored while we were doing the first instruction, while we were sitting down and doing things. But for those, there are millions of families in America that don't have that opportunity. And if schools don't give it to them, they won't have it. So thinking about how technology can help scale tutoring. And I think this is a moment where communities can really come together if they find high quality impact technology tools to help really scale high quality work in a way that where they can address some gaps, but continue to think about, how do we push forward? We don't let kids get stuck in that remediation loop that has perpetuated, a cycle of oppression for millions of kids for hundreds of years.
I want to point out, so it's 2 points. One, at New America, we've been investigating this sort of issue and mostly from a open educational resources perspective. So we've been conducting some roundtables and discussions with administrators, with educators about teaching during the pandemic and about technology. And so if you go to one of the resources I've posted, that looks at OER and at New America, you'll see that some of the findings that we're talking about, which is like how different concerns people are having in these settings, kind of solutions that people want to do within their relative different perspectives within education. So that might be something to also point to. And then the other thing is thinking about design process. I think about technology tools and those who have access to technology, sometimes going back to what is the process of design thinking and how are we supporting that with children and youth, as well as with educators, and meeting people where they are with the technology. As someone who works in the side of working with developers, I found that one of the most important skills with technology is being able to just be curious, to be able to create, to be able to explore. So in knowing that there are these existing inequities, but can we use sort of kind of focus on process-based thinking and really kind of helping to support that with children and youth, because that is very important from the technology perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to jump to Tania Hinojosa's question, because she's thinking about scale and building the capacity of teachers, right? Her question is, can anyone share some examples on how to build community through technology? I've heard some good ideas, but I'm wondering how we can support educators stay connected with each other, essentially, and learning from one another in a way that can scale quality. Because that's always been a problem in education. There are pockets of excellence, and how do we get what one teacher is doing to millions of teachers understanding that? And technology can help us do that. What are your thoughts on it?
This is Valerie. I'd like to ask Lydia to comment upon how the Verizon Innovative Learning Schools initiative has built community in low-income families. It has been amazing to watch that in school districts where when you bring folks in and they have to decide consciously to allow their students to engage. Talk a little bit about, Lydia, how that builds community by definition.
Sure, and Valerie, in full disclosure, was in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and our program was there, and she was very involved with it. So we've worked closely together around what that means for different school communities. we work closely with the parent coordinators because we think it's very important for everyone who is responsible for a scholar to understand what it means to be in a high, technology rich environment and bringing those devices home. A lot of the resources that Maria mentioned are again, resources that we recommend to our families. What we have found is our principals and our educators share stories with each other about ways that they can connect with families. And so some of that is being available, and this gets back to making sure every child has a working device all the time that's connected to the internet that they can take home, right, with some safety parameters. But they are then able to communicate after hours with their teachers. It may be posting questions. They may be able to communicate with each other. They're able to use translation services so that Google Translate, other free translators have been able to break down barriers, language barriers that often are not able to be broken down live. So there are some great things that are happening with technology where parents are more connected. We have schools that have been holding evening town halls on Zoom or in other, on other platforms where parents before weren't able to come to a parent-teacher meeting during the day, but they can do it in the evening, and they may be doing it around dinner time where the kids are also watching. We have superintendents, we may have families that are not literate, right? So we've written a text newsletter about what's happening in the school, regardless of whether you translate it, may not always be the best thing. We have schools that are doing that, but they're also doing a recorded message to families about what's going on in the school and what kinds of things are coming up. They may stream events where parents can participate or log in from a phone. So there are ways that technology is bridging some of these gaps where parents who have the kinds of jobs that don't allow them to leave and come to school, parents can still be connected and use technology as a way to participate in their child's learning. We have launched at Digital Promise a coaching community for instructional coaches where they can get together and share best practices about coaching in schools and what's worked for them. So, and then we have an internal community for all of our 412 schools, but we also work to push out those best practices. We'll be doing more of that in the coming years. We're doing more video work. We used to do live tours, and we hope to get back to more in-person things, but there are certainly ways that technology can bring people together. I would say one more word of sort of advice and caution is technology gives us the ability to individualize instruction for students and give them what they need, and to use formative assessments to make those diagnoses, and teachers can get that information quickly for almost just in time interventions. It also can be very isolating. And so I think when we talk about high dosage tutoring, we have to be a little bit careful about making sure it doesn't devolve into drill and kill for long periods of time, and that all of these individualized plans don't have students just working on their own. We did talk about powerful learning, and Amanda talked about collaboration and communication, making sure that students are connecting with technology and not just with blinders on doing their own thing.
And I just wanna add a note there. I think it's also important to consider how do we use technology and leverage technology to also create community for families and caregivers and their parents, because that's equally important in this conversation. And what I've been seeing is how families are just creating groups in WhatsApp. So WhatsApp is a tool that is now very popular, and the parents are supporting each other. So they are not just sharing resources to support their kids in terms of their academic needs during distance learning, but also just cheating themselves through the pandemic to survive, right? The type of message that we have been receiving and being aware of is really I think, inspiring how families have been very creative in leveraging technology during the pandemic to just support each other and navigate these challenging times and, learn from each other. So I think that's the other point. And I've seen also Facebook groups and other type of groups that are happening just through different tech platforms that I think are really there for us to use and to leverage the way we need. So it's back again to my point at the beginning, it's all about being intentional and seeing how do we organize ourselves and think about our needs and use those tools to support what we want for us, our families, and our kids.
Mm-hmm. Maria, there's another question in here for you from Fernando Gonzalez, and he said, at Make Way for Books, they've developed a smartphone app that provides free access to books in English and Spanish to families. They said they definitely run into the issue of the digital divide, particularly with Native communities that they work with, but it seems like there might be an opportunity to leverage mobile data to provide access, since it seems like there is more access to mobile data than there is at-home internet access. So his specific question is, what are your thoughts in terms of you using mobile data and smartphone apps to try to bridge that digital divide?
I think it's a great solution because we have seen the digital divide exist and continues, and we knew that before the pandemic. And when we all faced the reality and the needs of distance learning a year ago, it just became so clear what the problem is. So Fernando, I think that is a great solution. And I also have to add, I remember last year we did this national survey with families with kids 0 to 8. And it's about the access of a smartphone among low-income families is about 95%. So most of them have a smartphone. So having an app that will provide them with free access to books, I think it's a wonderful idea. Now, my suggestion would be for you to think about how do you spread out the word about that resource? Because if you have a great app that is going to support families with free books, and I'm sure you're going to be taking care of the curation of those books, is how do you let the families know so they discover that resource? Because I think that's one of the most, biggest challenges is how do we meet families where they are? And that's something that we're being very intentional at Common Sense and really being creative in terms of finding them through texting or Instagram or Facebook. It depends on the generation. So you need to think about what are the best ways to let the families know about this app. But I think it's a great solution. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. And again, we still have about 8 minutes remaining in our session. So if you have questions, you can put them in the question and answer box. I'm going to go to Karen Nemeth's question now, which is, she says, I think technology is really necessary to support linguistically diverse children and families. You need quick responsive translations and enhanced resources like videos to help them understand content. But how do we get developers and writers and webinar speakers to talk about that more explicitly? And then she asked a follow-up, and how do we get past only talking about English and Spanish as we think about, our country that has, hundreds and thousands of languages and cultures?
I would say there are many translation apps that are free. Google Translate is one. There are several others where you can either type or speak into it and choose the original language and the language into which it should be translated. And then depending on what the resources are, most school districts do translate into every language. And Valerie, I know you can speak to this, but some of our districts are working with 25 or more languages and translate materials into all of those languages, particularly when it requires parental permission or signature. So I think we use Spanish as a shorthand, but really there are many, many, many more languages that are being used, and that materials and some of these new technology solutions and translators are able to translate into just about any language for parents.
Hi, Karen. I actually know her as a colleague. As someone who now also works in the development side as well as integration, I think one of the things is that we've been developers are trying to be more mindful of being more responsive to communities and families, and it is still a process that's happening. One thing that I've noticed in the projects that we've had in the Learning Games Lab, because we produce apps and videos and all sorts of things for different sorts of product, like for different sorts of target groups, is being able to find out who we're actually reaching, and then working with them in collaboration and making sure that that the information is accessible and it connects to our actual target audience, as well as that it's in like the language, and then also supports the overall goals of the community themselves. And I think the more we have models of that and more ways in which, like, for instance, we've been sharing out our approach to being more inclusive of different types of identity groups, and sharing that within other developers. And so people have been trying to figure out what that looks like. And so the more models we have of how to create a more inclusive process helps, as well as the end results of products, what that looks like.
Okay, well, there's a poll that has come up. As if you can kindly take a moment to answer those questions, to give us feedback on this particular session, we would greatly appreciate that. And also during the course of the session, we were informed that there has been a shooting that's happened in our country once again, and I don't have enough detail about that at the moment.
Sean, thank you for mentioning that. I would like to invite all of our 170 or so participants today to join us in a moment of silence to commemorate in memory of the victims, not only in Boulder, Colorado, the 10 folks who died in Atlanta, Georgia, and 5 more in Springfield, Missouri, just recently, as well as the communities that are hurting, and the fear that has been spurred, renewed fear that has been spurred by these recent shootings. Would you all join me in just taking a moment to remember those families? Thank you. My goal in doing that was just to underscore the importance of educating all of our people, and that we are here to eradicate hate and injustice wherever we encounter it, and to make sure that no matter what the platform, what the venue, what the gathering, what the motivation, that we all remember that everybody is entitled to feel safe and cared for, educated and loved. And I just want to lift up the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. As a former high school principal, I could tell you the greatest joy, the greatest gift that I could ever have received would have been every one of my children walking through the door in the 9th grade, reading on grade level. And in the school district the school that I led as a principal, we were the highest dropout rate in the state. And when I did the numbers, when I first came in, only 40% of my kids were coming to us reading on grade level. We've got to do a great job. So thank you to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you to all of our wonderful presenters and great points of view. Particularly thank you to Dr. Sean Joseph for leading us. Yoli?
Great. Well, thank you. We actually have just a few more minutes. I'm wondering if, before I share my thanks to all of you, if we could take on one more question that just came up a moment ago, and hoping that you guys would all chime in. It's a pretty long question, but it really is, and I think it would round this out in terms of some of the challenges of technology, is, how do we think about the lack of balance that sometimes technology can create, and the effects on the brain, the eyes, the muscles related to hands, arms, and back. So this really, I think, is a question about thinking about this holistically, also about our health and well-being. We know ed tech has the power of revolutionizing learning and scaling, But one of the things that we might also keep in mind, as we know about some of the not so positive sides of technology, and then we can close.
As we at Bell Excel last spring, as we were recognizing that many schools were going to be operating at a distance, we worked with our curriculum partner Scholastic to think about how we could adapt our on-site curriculum to make sure that scholars had access to a high quality curriculum over the summer. And one of the things that we focused on, Yoli, was actually making sure that scholars had physical materials in their hands. So in addition to being able to access technology and resources like that, each scholar that was part of the program actually had a take-home pack that not only included pages for notes, but included authentic literature and materials that they can pick up and hold. And I think, as we continue to see distance learning happening, I think that's an important thing just to think about. How can we actually still leverage great technology to connect and encourage scholars to log on to online activities? And also, how can we ensure they're still picking up that beautiful book and spending time thinking in that way? I also, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I'm just thinking a lot about what it looks like to move young people from so much screen time into this in-person space. I was actually just, I bumped into a friend on the street the other day in the city, and we hadn't seen each other in a long time. And it was a little awkward at first. And she said, gosh, I just don't even know where to look. I'm so not used to seeing people in person. I'm not sure where to focus my eyes. Like, should I be looking at your mask or your eyes or your forehead? And I just think that was a moment of her reflecting on, gosh, this is a big change to be in person. And it's going to be important to support our educators and our leaders in thinking that through. And how can you really support young people as they come back together in person?
Thank you, Mark. And I know Dr. Joseph in the beginning, he reminded us that nothing can replace the teacher, that human to human contact and relationship. So absolutely, it's a reminder that technology is powerful, but it's not the be all and end all, and the relationships are key. And we know that parents in particular worry about how much is too much for their children.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say I have on my Britannica site, as well as with Edutopia, I actually have some ideas of things in context that are project-based that you can blend on, like using technology as well as not using technology. So I would point to that as a potential resource. And if anyone has any specific questions, because I know each specific program, each way in which they work with communities differs, feel free to reach out to me and we can have a follow-up chat.
Thank you. Any last thought before I take us to our last couple of minutes of closing from anybody? Okay, well then this is my opportunity. First of all, Valerie, thank you for the moment of silence, for reminding us that we're all here first and foremost to care about each other. And appreciate that moment very much. Thank you. And I also am so grateful to all of you, starting with Dr. Joseph as our moderator. You brought such great energy and insight and wisdom into the conversation. Just so appreciate you joining us today. Thank you to Lydia Logan of Digital Promise, to Maria Alvarez from Common Sense Media. Thank you, Mark Williams from Bell Excel. Thank you, Amanda Armstrong from New America. And the University of New Mexico. Good luck with all your work as you complete your PhD. Thank you to all of you for joining us and for lifting up this important conversation on behalf of the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. So with that, let me just close out by sharing, Sierra, if you could load up our upcoming webinars. We hope you will continue to join us in these learning conversations. Next week, we have a double header. We have a 12:30 Eastern peer exchange focused on learning pods and how communities in the network have responded, what they have learned, and what's next. So we'll hear from a few of our GLR communities on that. And in the afternoon, we will continue our conversation focused on the role of parents, of families, family engagement, the relationship between parents and schools, parents and teachers. And we'll learn from district leaders and program partners the work they've done this past year during the pandemic to really deepen and accelerate authentic family engagement. I encourage all of you to join us for that session. And beginning in April, on April 6th at 3 Eastern, we'll come back to our Learning Loss Recovery Challenge series with a focus on student assessments and learning recovery. We'll talk about using diagnostics for differentiated instruction. So please join us for today. Thank you for joining. Have a great rest of your week. Take good care.